What's up guys, it's Zero here, and we are here for our monthly end of month tier list. This time we're taking a look at the meta in set 8 of G and Zero, and this is our first double set, I think, in all of the game, excluding Global merging set 2 and 3 together, but this is the first true double set where two sets come out at once, and honestly speaking, despite there being two sets, I don't think the meta has changed that much, but that being said, we will still take a look at the meta and the new decks and see what they did to the game. So yeah, without further ado, let's start. So again, B tier is like the solid decks, A tier are the good decks, and S tiers are the decks that I consider the best in the game right now. And the decks that aren't here, I just don't think are good at all. I don't think belong on the list at all. So if there's a deck you're wondering why it's not here, it belongs under B tier. So what you just have pretend it's an imaginary C tier here where it's everything else basically. So yeah. So we'll start off with the old stuff first. So so these are all the new stuff. Just go Sharheart. I think Sharheart's probably like middle of the road beater deck. Deck doesn't do too much. It just kind of has guard restrict, can kind of multi attack, but the deck just kind of whatever. I don't think that can do special. Just a bunch of glory checks, and yeah, that's all the deck really does. It's solid at best. I think it's like a solid playable deck that's not amazing, not terrible. Next up, we have Chaos. I think Chaos is either like high B, low A, just kind of does degenerate things. But again, very polarizing. I'll just put it top B for now. Very polarizing matchups. Again, I said this like everyone throughout this deck. You either have a really good matchup against your opponent, or you just kind of bend over to them because they have resist and all that. But like we saw in the CS, this deck you couldn't tech in the anti-resist to it into the deck. But the issue with that is for example, if you anti-resist something in the front row, and then you lock it, the next turn you cannot use Chaos' skill to pop, nor can you use something like Palladium to relock, because once the card gets unlocked, it gets resist again, meaning you can no longer target it with effects. So there's a limit to how much the anti-resist can actually do for the deck. So even with that, I think the deck belongs lowest top of B, highest top bottom of A. So I'll just leave it in the B for now. Next up, we have Night Rose. I put Night Rose previous in S tier last month, but I do think the deck does belong in like the top of A at best this month, in my opinion. So my reasoning for putting Night Rose lower in a whole tier is I think that's just too slow now. The deck's first ride is almost always Obadiah, and the thing is, Obadiah is just a really slow first ride because Night Rose basically cannot kill on first ride. Like at all, unless you like push your opponent to 4 or 5 from your first early few turns. But rather this deck has to use that first ride turn to set up, and your push power on that first ride is kind of mediocre. Just kind of puts the deck in a very awkward position where like all the other decks are either like super defensively good like Asha or super aggressive like Altmile, where it just kind of that really awkward spot where it just has to use that turn to set up and do like at most 2 damage, and the next turn your opponent heal down again down to like 3 or 4. Your kill turn becomes not as good. Night Rose is kind of only really potent when your opponent's at 5. Even at 4, you risk a potential defensive on the 5th damage. So with all those factors, I think this deck is still really good, still very threatening when bringing your opponents at 5. But just getting there is kind of what's putting it down for me, because you do need to use that first turn to try and Obadiah to set your drop zone unless you just open all your pieces. And even in those games where you do just hard draw all your pieces, you still need to. Bandit Rum is still not the best stride for pushing because your lanes are kind of not like really big like they are with Altmile because of Altmile shard bonus. So even with that, this deck's I think this deck is just really hurt by its first stride of not being able to push. And another thing I forgot to mention is that this deck also really struggles to go from 3. So if your opponent heals down to 3, you are very screwed on your second stride if they heal down to 3. So with all those factors put together, I think this deck does belong in the that does not belong S tier anymore, but that's just obviously my opinion because it is my tier list. So yeah. Next up, Hari. I still think Hari is just a slightly worse Grand Blue. Hari doesn't have the same problem as Grand Blue of not being able to kill first ride. They definitely can push better on their first ride, but I think that Grand Blue is still just an overall better deck. I think Hari still has the issues of not being able to selectively put things in his soul. Sometimes your soul just ends up being ass, and you're just kind of screwed for it. So. Overall, it does similar things to Night Rose, but I think it's just overall a little bit worse. I'm not an expert at this deck. I still don't know how to play this deck. I'm too lazy to learn it, but from what I've seen from other people do, and from watching other people play, just kind of doesn't impress me too much. So I think Hari belongs basically with Night Rose, in like in the higher echelon of A, but under Night Rose in my opinion. Asha, I think, is a very obvious S tier. I think Asha is still the best deck in the game, and set 8 only gave the cards even more cards to play with. There are now like 2 builds of Asha. You have the standard build that people are still playing, and then you have like the Bloom build. I think the Bloom build is inferior to the just like a regular Good Stuffs build, but I think the Bloom build is still a pretty solid deck because you still use Jingle 3 in that list. So there's that. But the old Asha list does play some of the new cards. There's like you can play the Enos Bloom PG package in it. There's like a few like okay, like 1 or 2 of grade 1, grade 2 Bloom cards. So deck overall just got better, even better, and this was already the best deck in the game, and it only got better. So definitely very good there. This deck definitely had its showing in CS. You didn't ever have to see it play because it was always banned, but there were 15 out of 16 players on Neo Nectar, and it was basically banned every single round. So just goes to show you how degenerate and how good this deck is, and I am really hoping Game Studio does something about this deck, because honestly speaking, this deck is very, like I said, it's very degenerate, and it's just not fun to play against. So it's like, I really wish they would do something about this deck, like choice restriction with 3 or something, but you never know. Game Studio doesn't really, don't look like they care about the balance of this game at all whatsoever, so I do think that thinking they'll hit this deck is a little bit of copium, but that aside, I think this deck is still the best deck in the game. Next up, we have Zabas. I think this deck has really fallen off the meta. I think this deck belongs in, like, honestly speaking, I think this deck belongs in B tier, honestly, like top of B. So, like, you just have so many other decks that just do what Zabas does but better now. Like, Light Rose is Zabas but better. I think Hari is Zabas but better now. Altmal is Zabas but better. You know, like, there's just so many better rush decks that lethal just as hard, if not harder, than Zabas now. I don't think there's an argument for this deck like in like A, but I really think this deck has fallen off at this point. I don't think you have any reason to play Zabas over any of the like the other good aggro decks. So I don't know. I think this deck just kind of fallen off. Don't think it's that good anymore. I'll leave it on top of B just because it can still like rob games from you. They go second, but you have much better decks to do that now that just let you rob games going second. So I think Zabas definitely belongs in B tier at best. Next up, we have duos. I'll put this as duo or Victoria Mirror, any like duo-centric-ish deck. I put this deck in A tier last month, and I don't think my opinion that has changed at all. In fact, I think my opinion deck has gone even lowered. But yeah, this deck just duos are just too slow now. I think that's the biggest thing. Duos are just way too slow. Both decks just kind of don't have that push power. Like their push power is kind of whatever, their kill power is kind of whatever, and them duping guards against a lot just isn't enough now. But so that's why I think this deck belongs like in like the middle A tier now. But I think this deck's still solid enough that you don't feel too bad playing it. I sure wouldn't play it, but if someone were to play it, I wouldn't fault you for it. They didn't have other decks, but yeah, you can definitely do better. But I think this deck does belong in the middle of A tier now. Definitely fallen from its grace of being best deck for like 3-4 months before all these other broken decks came out. So yeah, Mule there. Chronojet, Jet actually got a bunch of support in set 8, and I do think that the gear stuff has definitely propelled this deck to actually playable now. I think this is actually pretty good now. I think I'll put the deck in like middle top of A tier. I put it higher than both these decks honestly, because I personal bias. I actually think Jet is a little bit better than Hari, maybe even better than Night Rose, but Jet basically had no rep in CS, so I'll leave it here just because of no data. But I personally think this deck is very good now. You have a very good game plan from like from pushing them to 5. You have very good kill turns now. Your kill turns very nice now. Your deck, if you can abuse the stand, the deck gets really cracked with it. If you just keep talenting the stand, you get a bunch of plussing off of it. Plus you get to recycle, and at some point your deck will be very thin with a few stands in it, and you'll flip the stands very likely because next stage is 5 drive checks, so you have an actual way to push the 5 now. Your kill turn is very good now. Your scaling is pretty good, and overall, I think this deck just got very solid. The deck exists now, right? The deck actually has a solid game plan, and I may have the original Chronojet here as I think represents Jet, but Jet G really helped the deck in my opinion. Every time you stride a Gear Dragon or a ZTV, you just get a free talent leap, which is really powerful, I think. So deck definitely flows very well, has a really solid kill turn, has a very good toolbox CG zone like it always has. So with all that, I think Gears have finally become an actual playable deck that's pretty good that you don't feel bad about playing anymore. So yeah, I think Gears definitely belong here. Next up, unfortunately, I will demote the Messiah down to like B tier as well. This deck is kind of, it did get support and definitely helps the deck, but I honestly don't think those cards helped it enough to make it good. So definitely think its deck belongs in like lower B, lower A, upper B kind of deck. Like, I don't know, this deck just kind of feels pretty mediocre, honestly. It doesn't feel like it's anything special anymore. It's really slow, very piece reliant, and which is, it pains me to say because I love Messiahs, but this deck just kind of isn't it right now. So yeah. Next up we have Vanquisher. Same thing. I think this deck is a little slow, a little too fair. I think also belongs to like the top of B. Vanquisher, just kind of 3 attack deck. Pre attack deck just kind of doesn't do enough. Dies to resist, which a smart what's that called? Jingle Thuria can deal with really well. This deck still too fair has a good matchup against this deck, but a smart, as long as the Asha player is smart and doesn't put out all their Thurias out super early and get them all binded, I think Asha can still very well win this matchup against Vanquisher. So Vanquisher does have its niche of doing the bind stuff, but honestly speaking, the bind does hurt Alt Mal, it does hurt Asha, but I think as long as those two decks, the pilot and those decks are smart, they can easily play around it. Asha, just don't put out your Thurias too early. Alt Mal, just push really fast so that them binding your Great Shoes don't matter as much. So yeah, I definitely think Vanquisher does belong in like the top of B, like B-ish, this area with all these decks. So yeah, Vanquisher goes there. Blade Master, I think this deck still belongs in S tier. Despite having low reps in CS, which I am actually confused. I actually do not know why this deck had such a low rep. I think this deck is actually really good. I actually do not know why people didn't play this deck. Maybe it's because it's expensive to build, because you do need like 4 Titans, 4 Novels, but I don't know. I actually do not know why this deck has such low rep in CS, but I think this deck is still very powerful. Like, Titan draws a bunch of cards, Novel's a great finisher. Jizon has ways to get over resist, like with Root Flare, and the people who did bring Titan to CS did have like resist removers and all that in their deck, which I don't think is that good, but it is an option for the deck. But I think Titan is still a very good deck. I think this definitely still belongs in S tier. I do think it's under Asha and nobody's surprised at Alt Mal. I think Blade Master is like slightly below these two decks. Like, I think these two decks are like almost in a tier of its own, and Blade Master is right under it. But I definitely think Blade Master is better than every deck in A tier. So Blade Master, still a very good deck, very solid, very all around solid, consistent deck. So yeah, everything belongs in S tier. And since I already put Alt Mal here, Alt Mal is the new monkey deck. It's a new go second win game deck, and it does it really well. First strike a Blade, push to 5, get a few guard checks in. Next stride, 10 get in, they're dead. So very aggressive deck. Very I like to call it a very ape-like deck, a deck for apes, monkey deck. So yeah, very good deck, and definitely will not be falling off anytime soon, because they also got a bunch of support inside 8. They have a grade 1 that counts as a grade 2 now, so searchable boosters. They have a grade 3 that can count as a grade 2, meaning extra grade 2s they can search out in case they run out grade 2s. Yeah, and they got Suleiman as well, extra finish, an extra combo extender. They also have Fidus, which can help you shoot over grade 2s and set up your board for later. But yeah, I think Alt Mal just got a bunch of good cards. They were already really good. They got even better cards now, and the deck will stay here until they decide to do something with this deck. Alt Mal, I don't think deserves nerfs as much as something like Jingle Thuria does, but I would like to see them tone down this deck a little bit more, just a wee bit. But Alt Mal definitely still a very powerful deck. Next up we have Celestials. I think this deck definitely belongs in like B tier. This deck is way too slow now. I think I never thought this deck was particularly good to begin with. My opinion that has not changed at all. I think this deck is way too slow to compete with the current deck. So yeah, definitely somewhere middling of B tier. Same with Revengers. I think this deck also belongs here. Doesn't do nearly enough. A little bit slow. Also can deck itself out sometimes. Yeah, definitely somewhere. I even think that's probably the worst deck in this list so far. Probably, honestly speaking, we go somewhere there. And Gurgut, I actually think belongs in either in S or the bottom of A, actually, or top of A. Very typical. I think Gurgut is actually really. I think Gurgut belongs either here or here, how you look at it. But personally, for now, I will put it into top of A just because I think the other decks are a wee bit better. But I think Gurgut actually plays super well into the current meta just because of what the deck does. Glorious Rating is a very good finisher, for one. So the deck does have a finisher. The the Gurgit Stride letting you have 3 intercepts really hurts a deck like Alt Mal, because Alt Mal can't swing at face unless they have Flame Blaster Blink or entire intercepts, and even then you can just make it so your intercepts in the back row are all like grade 1s or have resist or something, so they can't retire it. So Alt Mal can get stopped by a turn from the Gurgit Stride bonus. Gurgit's GB2 can also help you not just take a just like eat shit to the face, because 21 can base Vanguard is pretty hard to get over. So I think Gurgit has all the tools it needs. It plays very well into the meta. The Gurgit Stride also lets you hit into Jingle 3 numbers, because all your rears become over 21, so very good there too. So yeah, I think Gurgit just has a bunch of good tools for it to function in the existing meta right now. So yeah, the only deck that I think this deck has a bad matchup against is Kagero, or Blade Master, because Blade Master can just retire all your stuff. They don't care about any of your gimmicks, because those scaling boosters let you hit over GB2 numbers. Titan can retire all your back row intercepts. There's limited how much resistant Antretar you can put into the board. So, and all that, I do think Gurgit is a very good deck that plays well into the top 2 prominent decks, and has one like really not good matchup, which is in Blade Master. But overall, I think Gurgit is still a very powerful deck, and definitely kind of slept on, I think. So yeah, top of A tier, and finally we're onto the new deck. So I'm gonna get this garbage out of the way first. Definitely like off the list next month for sure. Demiurge, Chronofang, the not jet focused central builds. I have not seen a single person play Demiurge, and I can understand why, because this deck is hot garbage. Chronofang I've kind of played around with, but the deck is also pretty underwhelming. I play against Euphonia 2, that just kind of dies. So all the non-jet focused gear decks are just kind of bad. So bottom of B off the list next month. It's probably even worse. This deck probably is in its C tier, but I'm too lazy to make a new tier just for this. But this Demiurge is really bad. Let's just leave it at that. Coral is also pretty bad. I think Coral doesn't do anything outstanding. Anything that sets it apart from other fish decks. I think this Coral also belongs like the bottom of B tier. Doesn't do anything special. I don't think I've played against anyone with this deck. I haven't played it myself either, because this deck actually requires you to have 4 GRs of the Coral, so it's pretty expensive to build, and it's pretty ass. So yeah, belongs somewhere here. I think Loris is an okay deck. This is a deck I have tried. I think Loris is probably better than the duelist decks. My only issue with Loris is that it's a little bit too slow, because on all the Bermuda decks first strides are all kind of whatever. They're usually like hit, bounce, recall, hit again. Like for like 2 damage is pretty fine, unless you're playing specifically Prisms, because Prisms can definitely just do on first stride. But we'll talk about it after. Issue with Loris is that your first stride is your generic fish first stride, which is fine, nothing wrong with that. Second stride Loris, after that just becomes an slightly better Olivia, and only after on your third stride will Loris be better than an Olivia. So this deck actually has to make it to third stride to be a better deck than all the other fish decks and just do Olivia. So that's my issue with that. Also doesn't help that the core of the deck overall is worse, because to play Loris you need to actually have Harmony cards to stand with it. So because you're forced to play a Harmony core in your deck, you can't play all the actual good cards like Roan, like the duo package. You don't have like the Celtic late package like you do in Prism. So overall, I think this is just kind of not it, in my opinion. Just kind of too slow. If this deck could do double stand Loris on second stride, I think that could be a lot better, because you actually have a super explosive turn 2 stride. So yeah, the fact that deck has to make it a third stride kind of slows it down a little too much, in my opinion, for making it any better than this. Yeah. And finally, we have the deck that I personally think is Copium, but apparently all of JP loves this deck. Prisms. I think Prisms hover around Chronojet range. I think the deck is definitely like an A tier deck at best. I played the deck myself. I can see why people like this deck, but in my opinion, the deck relies a little bit too much on drawing the early game pieces. If you don't know, this deck has a really powerful turn 2 play in the new Celtic and the new late, I think is the name of the card, where like it hits, you bounce the late back to hand to draw one, and then the late CC 1 to get 5k, so you can do a really strong, like really good early aggro on this deck with a pretty like solid finisher too, with the break ride, with the break ride combo with the Sunshine Vert. But I think this deck just doesn't open the turn 2. It actually was kind of weak in my opinion. Just doesn't have that oomph that it has like when you do draw it. And yeah, but deck has strong kill turn. It has pretty decent plussing, and it's really insane when this deck gets to do its game plan on turn 2, which is pretty cool. So I guess I can move it like here-ish. I think like honestly speaking, I think I'm just gonna move these 2 decks under here. And I think these decks are truly like in a tier of its own after looking at it. I think these decks are a little bit too slow, don't do enough. I think these decks here are actually pretty solid here, I think, overall. I think these decks, yeah. So I think I'll just move these 2 decks down. I think in this tier, I think Gurgrit's... I just move Gurgrit up here then, honestly speaking. I think these decks are all interchangeable, more or less. I think in this tier, I think these 2 decks are head and shoulders above these 2 decks, or at least above these 2, and these 2 decks are slightly interchangeable. So yeah, I think I'll leave it like this. So yeah, so looking at now, I think Gurgit probably does belong in S tier, like bottom of S tier. I think it's probably the worst like of the bunch, but still, I think does belong there. It has a really good match across the board. So yeah. But going back to Prisms, they have the things needed to be a good deck, but not drawing a piece it kind of does hurt. And the deck does actually kind of run the risk of potential deck out because they do cycle through and draw a bunch of cards in their deck. So there is that, but the game should be over by then. So yeah. So that's it for my monthly tier list. Actually, a bunch of changes. I think I was a lot more harsh on decks this month. I think that I demoted a bunch of decks down a tier. But yeah, I think this is my personal opinions of this month's meta. Again, I think these 2 decks are by far the best 2 decks in the game right now. I think after that, third is Blademaster. I think Gurgrit is a solid 4th that you could push down here, but I think it is slightly better than all these decks under here. And then I think everything in A tier is interchangeable. So yeah, that's it for this month's tier list. Let me know your opinions down below in the comments, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.